21 minutes to 7. A British computer hacker faces an extradition hearing this morning. His father fears that he might kill himself if he's sent to an American prison. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sandford can tell us more. Real concerns about the health and welfare of this young man.
Yes, I mean, Lauri Love's been described as brilliant with computers. He's obviously got a fantastic mind when it comes to dealing with computers, and ever since childhood has been messing around with sort of hacking into computer games and so on. But his issue is that he's got fairly severe Asperger's syndrome and recurrent depression. And his father and his lawyers argue that if he ends up in a prison in America awaiting trial, he has a very, very high risk of suicide and probably wouldn't even be fit to stand trial in the United States. They're also concerned about a possible disproportionate sentence that he might get there. In America, he could get 10, 20 years or even a rest of life sentence for the crimes he's accused of committing. And they're saying that it should be possible for him to be put on trial here. The offences were committed allegedly from his parents' home in Suffolk, and they don't see why he should be sent to America to stand trial for what are fairly serious charges when he could stand trial for those same charges in the UK with a much better effect on his mental health.
What are his chances of avoiding this extradition?
Well, if you think of the very high-profile case of Gary McKinnon, which eventually the Home Secretary Theresa May stopped, then there's got to be a chance. In fact, after the Gary McKinnon case, there was a new rule introduced called the Forum Bar, in which courts here in the UK could say that if a case could be tried here in Britain, then it should be tried here in Britain rather than overseas. I mean, the problem is that the organisations that Lauri Love's alleged to have hacked into include the Federal Reserve, the FBI, the US Army, the Missile Defense Agency, the Department of Defense, NASA. I mean, there's a very, very big US government agencies, and clearly the Americans want to make a point by putting him on trial. His lawyers argue, well, that's not really the point. His mental health should also be part of the consideration.
Daniel Sandford, thank you. We'll be talking to his father later in the programme.
The time is now 16 minutes to 8.
A British man accused of hacking into US federal computer systems faces an extradition hearing this morning. Lauri Love, aged 31, has been diagnosed with Asperger's and depression. His father, who's a prison chaplain, fears that he might kill himself if he's sent to an American prison. And the Reverend Alexander Love joins us in the studio now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Of course, you are desperately sad and worried about your son, but what credibly leads you to believe that it isn't right for him to be extradited?
One or two things. First of all, we've had a big debate in this country about sovereignty, and we have made choices for good or bad, and yet we allow the Americans to extradite our citizens to America, but the Americans do not allow their citizens to be extradited to here. As far as I can tell, no Americans ever stood trial in this country, and yet my son can be taken away and put on trial. That's the legal objection.
And on personal grounds, what is it that leads you to be so concerned for your son?
On personal grounds, my son has Asperger's and he has depression, but he also suffers from very bad eczema and asthma, which have psychological triggers. And at the very heart of it all is his emphatic statement that he will kill himself. Now, I know I'm his father and you might say I'm biased, but I work with people who are vulnerable at times, and I have a wee bit of experience in this after 36 years as a minister. When Lauri says he will kill himself if he's taken to America, I believe him to be stating something he intends to do. And he needs the support of his family. A 31-year-old man with all his gift and all his ability, and yet he chooses to live at home because it's the only place he can feel safe. If the Americans have their way, a whole ocean will be put between us and him. And one of the things we do to help people who are vulnerable is keep family contacts. Such family contacts will be impossible.
So you're not disputing these are serious charges. You're not disputing the fact that the Americans have every right to pursue this, but you're asking in this case, the case of your son, that humanitarian concerns are put first.
No, I think I am disputing it as much as it is unfair that we have a treaty which is so one-sided. If the Americans say they will not allow their citizens to be taken away without evidence being proved in America because of constitutional rights, surely we should have that same statement here.
Are you inspired at all by the success of the campaign to stop the extradition of Gary McKinnon?
I find hope in it, and I hope that that precedent will be set in law.
So your hope now rests on what? On the Home Secretary intervening? On members of Parliament coming to your aid and arguing your case?
No, from what I gather now, the law must be worked out by the judge and the legal system in this country. The Home Secretary no longer has any say in that way. However, I believe that the present treaty should be put into abeyance until such time as a better treaty is produced, which is more fair. If we had an arrest warrant in Europe that allowed Germany to extradite our citizens, but we couldn't get theirs, we would soon be annoyed. Why do we do this with the Americans?
And so your last hope specifically for your son, as against a change of the law for the future, is in this extradition hearing over the next 2 days?
Yes, in the hearing that I'm hoping over the last 2 days, that the judge will see that Lauri's well-being and the duty of care we have as a nation towards those who are vulnerable will overrule any need to perplate the Americans in this matter.
The Reverend Alexander Love, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.